Test, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, I saw you. No, you're up there. Very intriguing.
Oh, okay. Sorry, we can keep playing if you want. There's a couple of clips. And as we play this, audio just a little bit. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. All of you in person, those of you on Zoom, hello, thank you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Randy Villegas. I'm an associate professor of political science here at COS. A few reminders that we are continuing to follow COS COVID-19 policies, including wearing face masks during our event, covering our noses, so thank you for your cooperation. If you don't have a face mask and you need one, you up there. We thank you for your cooperation in helping keep everyone safe during this time. We have our video wrapping up here, the 1 year anniversary of Cesar Chavez's passing in Sacramento, California. I just wanted to share a little bit about our series before we get started. Our poli-sci Civic Engagement Series here seeks to connect our student body, our campus community, and the public to critical conversations around politics, political science, local and statewide government, advocacy, political participation, and current political topics. We want to facilitate conversations between our community, experts, policymakers, journalists, advocates, organizers, and public servants representing diverse interests, especially here in the Central Valley. That's why I'm so excited to have all of our panelists here tonight. What you may not know is that we didn't plan this intentionally, but it worked out this way. 56 years ago today, 77 striking farm workers, most of them Mexican American and Filipino, began their march from the town of Delano to our state capital of Sacramento, 340 miles to the north. With us today, we have individuals who were involved with that effort, and have since then continued to play a role within the farm worker movement and within the civil rights movement more broadly. One of our panelists, who you will see here on our stage, as well as in these historic photos on this piano, and please, I encourage you after the event, take some photos. We have Roberto El Capitan Bustos. Mr. Bustos was the captain of the historic Peregrinación, the pilgrimage from Delano to Sacramento in March and April of 1966. As farm workers brought their grievances to the legislature and the governor, Mr. Bustos captained the march to place farm workers' concerns straight to California state leaders and the rest of the world. Mr. Bustos was also a striker and a boycotter, and he has spent his life keeping the story of the farm worker movement and the Great Pilgrimage alive. Thank you for helping me welcome Mr. Bustos. Next, we have Cynthia Bell. Cynthia Bell began working in the UFW in 1969 as a volunteer. She was then assigned by Cesar Chavez as a full-time volunteer in July of 1970, working in many different positions, including working alongside Ellen Chavez at the credit union, and eventually became the director of organizing in Delano, California. Cynthia would then go on to work with the MLK Service Center and was then called by Cesar Chavez, and she moved to La Paz in Keene, California to work with the Farm Workers Communications Department. Cynthia would go on to play a role developing the Fred Ross Educational Center and was the first manager of Radio Campesina. Please help me welcome Cynthia. Next we have Andres Chavez, the Director of Strategic Initiatives of the Cesar Chavez Foundation. Andres moves foundation initiatives and projects forward, assisting with its 4 funds: communication, housing and economic development, education, and the National Chavez Center. The youngest son of Socorro and Paul Chavez, Cesar Chavez's middle son, Andres grew up in La Paz in Keene, California, which now today hosts the Cesar E. Chavez National Monument. Raised in the farm worker movement founded by his grandfather, Cesar Chavez, Andres grew up greeting visitors, taking them on tours, and sharing his grandfather's history, as well as participating in countless marches, rallies, picket lines, demonstrations, and political campaigns. Andres graduated magna cum laude from CSUB in 2016, go Runners, right? With his degree in public policy and administration. He was active in student and community life, organizing immigrant rights rallies, and the first Hispanic Heritage Month observances, and opening a community garden in an underserved neighborhood. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Andres Chavez. And last, but definitely not least, we have Mr. Oscar De Leon. Mr. De Leon was born in Texas and immigrated to California on a flatbed truck alongside 3 other families. He's the 7th child in a family of 10 siblings, and growing up, he worked very hard in the fields alongside his family. He was the first in his family to graduate from high school and serve in the armed forces. Thank you for your service, Mr. De Leon. Mr. De Leon was also one of the first Chicanos to work in the media broadcasting industry, and he's provided such coverage for notable events as the Space Shuttle 2 launch, the return of American soldiers' remains from Korea, and footage in Cesar's Last Pass, the documentary. We're actually going to share a clip of that with you all today a little bit later. So please join me in welcoming Mr. De Leon. Just want to double check that we're recording. Awesome. I have some questions that are going to start us off and guide us through this conversation, but really I want this to be a community conversation. So about halfway through, if not a little bit sooner, we're actually going to open up to all of you to ask questions to either all of our panelists, or maybe you have a question for a specific panelist, but we really want this to be a guided community conversation. And so first, I want to start off with the question of what inspired you to join the movement? Let's start with Mr. Roberto Bustos.
Well, it was, me and my brother back in early March, after coming home from working in the field in Porterville, he told me, let's go to a meeting tonight. What meeting? I told him. There's a meeting tonight in early March, and this man is yelling out there, Huelga, Huelga. He's going to be there tonight. He's going to talk about the union. He's going to talk about, what he's fighting and what we should all be involved with, and so forth and so forth. So we went to the meeting. There were about 70 of us there, farmworkers. And then all of a sudden somebody started talking and talking and talking. I said, who's talking? It was Cesar talking. And what he was saying, it reminded me so much of my dad, my father, my mother, my brother, my sisters who work in the fields. I said, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. What he's telling us is what's happening out there every day in the fields. No water, no restrooms, no how they've been treated and the way they've been paid, 50 cents an hour, things like that. No way. So that night, we went up to him and we introduced ourselves, me and my brother Ramon. We introduced ourselves, and then he gave us a hug and he said, guys, come tomorrow to the office. We want to talk to you some more. Right. Well, that night we told our foreman, we're not going to work, we're going to go on strike, we're going to join the union. And the foreman said, you guys are going to die. You're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. You're going to die. There's no money coming in, no food, no nothing. And this morning we went in and we talked to Cesar. He told us again everything what was happening, was going on, what we needed to do. And that's why I joined. Right there and then we said, yes, we're going to stay here. That's how I joined the union back in 1965, September 16. That's how I joined the union. And I've been involved ever since. And I made a promise to him. I made a promise to Cesar Chavez that I will keep his legacy alive and the legacy of the farmworkers. So I've been doing it for 56 years. Even here in Visalia, we do the march that we do every year. I've been involved with 26 years doing the marches here in Visalia. I'm sure you guys know about it. We start here at COS, we go to the Whitman Center, we have a rally up there, and then we come back and we have a rally here also. So that's what we've been doing for 26, what I've been doing for 26 years. And we're gonna have another one coming up pretty soon. I'm sure we're gonna talk about it more. But that's how I joined the union. And that's why I'm still a member of the union, and I'll never forget it, and I'll never leave it.
March 25th, we're going to have a COVID-19 plan. There's going to be an art competition for youth. There's going to be activities. We've got lots going on April 25th. There's flyers in the hallway out there, so please join us if you can. Ms. Bell, the same question to you. What inspired you to join the movement?
Might get emotional. It's very personal. So anyways, I was born and raised in San Pedro, California. All my family are longshoremen's. My grandparents lived in Mexicali, and for summertime, they would send us to go spend it with my grandparents. And then a bunch of us got together, the neighborhood kids, and they said, let's go work and make money in the fields. So there was this young lady that lived across the street from my papa, and we all got on the van and we started off our adventure leaving at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Never in my life did I ever work as a farmer. So we ended up crossing the border and ending up in the famoso El Hoyo in Jalisco. And there's busloads and contractors and workers, and we're all like young, we're like, holy, what's going on? And then they told us how the lady that took us, a friend of our friend, I think it was the mother or grandmother, let's just go look and say if there's work for you. So we would go to the buses and say, tienen trabajo, okay, mujeres, and then they would make fun at us, so we didn't know what we were saying. So finally they got us to go do work in the middle of nowhere. We got in the bus, took like an hour to get there, and we did carrots, besaje, and we did a thinning of the lettuce. I worked with the group for 3 days. And the first day I worked, by the time we came back in the bus, this is on YouTube, we came back in the bus and it was already getting dark, and then you stand in line and they pay you. And I remember that I worked so hard that day. I was exhausted and I was scared and I didn't know we needed to pay. And they paid me, I think, like $11.65 for the whole day. And I remember that I looked at that and I looked at my parents, they made fun at me. They said, well, this is normal, well, not for me. And I saw that $11.65. And we did it for 2 or 3 days because I wanted to buy some outfits. You know, I was young, I wanted some money. So we did it for 3 more days. And then that was it. And then one weekend we went to Safeway. And my grandmother and my mom and we were all going in. And I saw a bunch of people in the parking lot. And I heard this man talking. And I held the crowd. I'm 71 years old, and this happened when I was like 17, 18. And I remember he was saying, los contratistas son rateros, los rancheros no les importa. He went on and talking about how they made us feel worthless, how we were worth more than what they were paying us, and that we needed a union. And in the meantime, Dolores Huerta, I didn't even know who Caesar was. Dolores Huerta was passing out little cards. They needed volunteers to go to the field office in, I think it was Indio. I think that's when they had the first field office. And I remember I told my mom and my grandma, you guys go, I want to go see what this is about. And everything he said, I had just gone through 3 days ago, not even 3 days ago. And I said, oh, I'm in. And it was destiny at that point, because I didn't know who Caesar was. I didn't know. All I know is that I worked for 3 days and it was horrible. That's all I'm going to say. And I filled up my little card, went back into the store with my mom and my grandmother, got a call from Dolores, got an interview, and I got hired as a volunteer to answer the phones because I was bilingual. I knew both languages. And that's how I got started.
Same question to you on this. What inspired you to join the movement? How were you brought to the movement?
Yeah, it's a little different than all these folks here. But first, I just want to say thank you to Randy and COS for hosting us here, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We know there's a lot of other things you could be doing, but I'm just as excited as you in the audience to be here because it's not very often that I get to share the stage with you. I think this is the first time I've been able to do it. So I'm going to probably do a lot less talking because they're the ones who have the real history. But I was born into the Farmworker movement, as you heard. I thought that Caesar was one of the co-founders of the movement. And so my involvement in the movement was a little different. I grew up there in La Paz at the National Monument. It's now a National Monument. I read visitors talking to different folks from different backgrounds who are coming to learn about the work of the Farmworker movement and sharing about the accomplishments that all these folks have a role in making happen. What inspires me, I think, is probably a more appropriate question to continue the work that I do. And what inspires me to do the work that I do today is really the work that you all did. Cynthia, I'm going to pick on you a little bit here just because this is something very close to my heart, but Most recently, I've been working very closely with our radio stations. Cynthia was the first manager of KUFW 90.5, which was out of Wood Lake, California. And Cynthia can attest better than I can, but the stories that I've heard was that at times they weren't sure if they were going to be able to pay the bills to keep the lights on, to pay the FCC. They were always kind of searching for change wherever they could find it because there just wasn't a lot of money to go around. And farm workers and campesinos and campesinas and other folks would take the little that they had at their pantries to make tamales and burritos, to put together food drives so they can raise money, or they'd sometimes take out their hat and pass the hat around so people could put some money into the pot to help pay these bills. And when I think about that, I feel a sense of obligation because if we don't continue the work that we do today, then everything they did is lost, right? And I think the same goes for all the students here and all the people in these seats. The work of the Farmworker movement went on to inspire other movements in urban areas that opened the way for us to have seats in college. The reason why I went to CSUB, the reason why CSUB is 70% Chicana is because of folks like this in the Farmworker movement. So for me, I'm indebted to these folks. And that's why I decided to give my life. One, because I was born into it, but most importantly, because if I didn't do it, well, then who else is going to do it? And so I'm forever grateful to these folks, and that's why I do it. And I didn't always understand that as a young kid. Unlike most of the young people, you kind of just go about your day, but as I begin to get older and older, I feel more of an obligation to continue the work that they've done. And the work changes over the years, but the simple fact of the matter is that farm workers are still struggling. There's different populations that are still in need, and it's our job to step up and do something about it. Because if we don't do something about it, then who is?
Before we share a little bit from our next panelist, we're going to actually share a clip from the documentary Cesar's Last Fast, again, which Mr. De Leon recorded footage from. I'm not sure if, Lauren, would you be able to possibly dim the lights? I'm not sure if there is. I should have done this beforehand, so that's my fault. But really, this is a very powerful clip. Oh, awesome. And so, before Mr. De Leon speaks, we're going to go ahead and play this clip.
We had an idea that a lot of people would want to participate in Caesar's funeral. And it was traditional anyway for us to lead processions from Memorial Park to 40 acres, which is a long throw up Parsons Road. We didn't know, but we're not surprised that 50,000 people showed up.
The consciousness and pride, our life and pride inside millions of young Hispanics who will never work on a farm. The farm workers gave them the hope that they could succeed and the inspiration to work for change. The message was clear. If it could happen in the field, it could happen anywhere. In the cities, in the port, in the city council, in the state legislature. The day will come when we win the economic and political rewards which are in keeping with our numbers in society. The day will come when the politicians will do the right thing for our people out of political necessity and not out of charity or idealism. And on that day, our nation shall fulfill its decree, and that fulfillment shall enrich us all.
Very powerful. Mr. De Leon, Can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to join the movement, capturing this footage?
Yeah, it was a really an exciting time for me. When I say exciting time, I was working at the Spanish station in Fresno, and I had to convince my bosses, both of them, to let me go with them and be there with them, and I did. And my famous line was, pretend Martin Luther King just passed away and he lives in Delima. What would you do? Now, I had to convince them because they were basically Mexican nationals. They understood Chavez and knew about it, but they didn't really know what I knew. So they said yes. So on a Thursday night, without arrangements, names, contacts, I show up at La Paz with my overnight case and a camera. I said, I'm here. I want to donate my time. I want to be here. And within 10 minutes, they said, yeah, come on in. And without knowing anyone, I'm on the premises there. It's night. I don't know where they're taking me. It's like I'm, really lost. But I knew what I had to be there, and it was my thing. I had to be there because this was going to be history, and I wanted to be part of it. And it was so important to me. I mean, I had seen Chavez at a distance growing up in the fields, and then closer up when I was in college, and then I was working in television, and now I saw him in the media and stuff, and he was rough. I remember one time he came to Fresno. They said, "Oh boy, we're gonna go out there and get pictures of him marching." Well, I'm packing 50 pounds of equipment, and I'm having to walk backwards as fast as I could. And I thought, oh no, this will never work. And you think they would slow down a little bit for the camera guys? They went faster, so I thought, okay, I gotta figure this out. So I did. I got the shots, but it's just so important that I believed in him early on. I just couldn't really join his group or anything, although I did think about joining them, but I just, it was like work, and following in the media. So I think I did my share doing that, and being there when it was so important to be there at the funeral. And I remember walking in there, and it's dark, and they're escorting me in, and he says, hey, you want to see him? And I thought, what, he's here? Of course he's here. So they took me up to where he was at, and they had him laid out on a table with flowers and flags and a couple of guards, and I thought, wow, this now it became real to me that this is what I asked for, and this is what I got. And like I said, this happened 27 years ago. And I'm still pretty vivid on the stuff, especially because I can look at my footage and know what I did. But the last 5 minutes of this documentary, probably 80% of the footage is all mine. And like I said, I'm very, very proud.
That's really what's going to stay with all of us for years to come, for generations to come. All the more importance to document these sorts of social movements and actions as they come. Like I mentioned earlier, for those of you who want to look, we have 2 historic photos right here on the piano that I encourage you to come in and take a look at after. Close-up of the marches. And 56 years ago today, March 17th. And the captain of that march was Mr. Roberto Bustos. And so my question for you is, tell us a little bit about the march, your journey, your leadership, challenges alongside that journey. And if you know, I know the march started with almost 100 farm workers. How many of you guys joined you by the time the march got to Sacramento along the way?
Well, every time I think about it, I say, wow, how did we do it? There was no practice, we didn't practice for it. There was no trial runs, All I remember saying is, it's getting late and let's go, and off we went. But before that, I remember Cesar came one night into the organizers meeting, there were 20 of us. And he said, guys, what do you think we go to Sacramento? And we go talk to the governor, the legislators, and tell them what's going on in the lane of the strike. how we've been treated by the growers and the police. Wow, the police, man, that's another story. And I said, hell yeah, let's go. You know, we'll get all the strikers and all the families, and then we do a caravan of cars, and we go to Sacramento. And we go see the governor and the legislators, and tell them what's going on. And then here comes the bad news. He said, no, I'm not talking about caravanning to Sacramento. And he do it this way, I'm talking about marching. What? Está loco este hombre. What? He wants us to march to Sacramento? And we kind of played around and we said, maybe all the pesticides in the grapes is affecting the brain. I said, no, guys, we can do it, you know, let's talk some more about it. You know, talk some more among you guys, among yourselves, and then we'll discuss it some more. And that's the way it was. We talked about it some more, and then we got a route, you know, and then we said, well, maybe the 99 freeway, we'll go to the 99 freeway or to the frontage road, so we won't get run over, you know. But no, Cesar wanted to take the scenic route and go to the back, and go to the backside, go to the other communities, other farmworker communities. But you know, we went to 53 towns, 53 towns. Half of those we stayed overnight, 25 of those we spent the night. We stopped here in Visalia, at the Catholic Church on 4th Street, that's where we spend the night. A lot of people spend some nights in homes because people came out and helped us. I could take 1 or 2 or 3 people, but the rest of us, the captains, for example, we slept in the parks, along the roadside. Any place we just throw our sleeping bag, and that's where we dropped. So that's the way the march was. You know, every day it was going, something was happening, something was going on. 77 of us started. We took the challenge. 77 of us. Men and women. A lot of people wanted to go, but because of health reasons, you know, school, kids, you know, and then we still have to keep the strike going, the picket line going, but not everybody could join. But we told them, come Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and come march with us. So that's what they did. They would come home, sleep, then go back the next Saturday and Sunday and march with us. So from 77, it grew, the line grew. 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. Every day the line would grow. In some towns, we just stopped and took a break. In some towns, we stopped and ate lunch. And the other town is where we stayed overnight. 25 days. And everybody talked about 340 miles. I think it was 400 miles. 400 miles. We went to the back road. We crossed the freeway 3 times. From Fresno, we jumped over to Firewall, Mendoza, and then we came back to Merced, we went to Planada, and then we came back to Lodi. 3 times we crossed the freeway. And let me tell you about Planada. I was invited to go to Planada to do a presentation to talk to some parents. I drove that way, and I got lost. I said, what? I got lost, I took the wrong turn. But we marched here. Marching, we got there. But when I was driving with the GPS, I got lost. But that's the way it was. Every day, something was going on. The police, the highway patrol wanted to change the route, but we said, no, we can't. We already have a route. This is where we're going. But they wanted to change it. They don't want people to see us, to draw attention. And that's another thing that we did in the march. You know, not so much that we're going to go talk to the governor and talk to the legislators. We want the world to know what's happening in Delano. But nobody knew about the strike. September 16th, September 8th, nobody knew what was going on in Delano. We had over 5,000 people on strike, and nobody knew about it. 1965, nobody knew about it. So we said, we're going to march, and we're going to tell the world what's going on in Delano. And people started saying, who are these people? Why are they marching? Where are they going? And they found out. Farmworkers, they're going to go fight for their rights and so forth. Let me tell you something, guys. Let me tell you something, man. In 1935, before my time and your time, Congress passed the National Labor Relations Act, better known as the National Labor Relations Board, which gives millions and millions of workers the right to organize, the right to belong to a union of their choice, and number three, the right to negotiate with your employer for better wages, more money, better treatment, and number four, the right to health insurance. Congress passed that law in 1935, but way at the bottom of that law, it says, except farm workers. What? Except farm workers and domestic workers, slash. I told Cesar, hey, why, Cesar? Why do we put that down? And he told me, Roberto, listen, farm workers don't have any friends in Congress. Farm workers don't have anybody to fight for them. That's why we're here. That's why we have to do what we have to do. And this is what we're still doing. There's millions of workers out there that need to be organized. And you guys can do it. And Cesar right now would say to you guys right now, he's very proud of you that you're in school. That you're in school getting an education. You know, he went only to the 8th grade, right? To the 8th grade, but he read a lot of books. He read a lot. Discrimination, abuses, labor laws, everything he read. That's why he got a lot of knowledge and fighting. But he would be proud of you. He heavily is proud of you for staying in school and getting an education. And when you get the education, don't forget where you came from. And come back and help your community.
Something I teach my classes about. Farm workers only just got guaranteed overtime within the last 4 to 5 years here in California. That's only specific to California. Farm workers in other states, entirely different ballgame, typically worse. And so this speaks to the fact that the farm worker movement isn't over. Right? There's still plenty of work to be done, and lots of things to address. Ms. Bell, you played a role in developing the Fred Ross Educational Center, managed Radio Campesina, and many other aspects of the movement. Tell us a little bit about Fred Ross and some of your work as directing organizer, communications director.
Oh my
and
gosh.
so much more.
I don't know, Caesar always picked on me. When I started working or being a volunteer, there wasn't a lot of women in leadership roles. But for some reason, every time he had an idea to start something, like the Fred Ross Educational Center, brought me up to La Paz, so I could be part of the 5 staff. That was in administration. We had Dave Walcott, we had Sister Ascension, and Pete Moyle was the director of it. And he had an idea to have a school and bring farm workers in. And he wanted them to learn to negotiate contracts, was one class, organize, and I think contract enforcement. The first one was negotiations. And Fred Ross he came for the grand opening in La Paz. We have pictures, and we developed the curriculum. I pretty much was the administrator assistant. I did all the budget, all the fighting, and doing presentations with the budgets, and then Caesar would call me up. He would always call me Mija. He says, what's this budget? It's so much. And I had to go back to Pete and say, he's not going to approve it, but we got it done. And we brought people in from all over the country. We brought in professors. Fred Ross gave classes. He gave classes also on the organizing aspect and the negotiating. And as an administrator and helping getting the curriculum ready, the test and all that stuff, and dealing with all the students, I would sit in into a lot of these classes, and I picked up a lot. When we did the negotiating class, and John Sloan, I think his name was a professor from upstate New York, and he was teaching them body language. Oh boy, does that help you in life, I swear to God. And don't ever underestimate the teaching of body language, eye contact. That's what they emphasize on that. But there was other things. How do you talk to workers when it came to organizing Fred Ross? He was my teacher. Caesar taught me a lot, but Fred Ross was incredible. He will make you do things that you never thought you would do. he would take you out. We were doing a campaign in LA, and he took me into this precinct, and he says, I want you to walk this precinct, gave me the map, and I want you to find a house in this precinct. And I want you to find an anchor home, someone that's gonna lend you the house, so you could be working out of their house, making phone calls and giving out the books. And I looked at him like, what? You know, no car, no driving, dropped me off in LA. I looked at him, and then he said, and I'll pick you up here at 8 o'clock, the same, right? Take the street number, and I'll pick you up at 8 o'clock. So you walk the precinct and you talk to people, and I did get a lady to lend me her house for a whole week. We did phone banking, we did everything from there. And then when I finally walked back, Fred Ross was waiting for me. He says, well, did you find someone? I said, yeah, I did. But when I was walking, I was scared. I said, how am I going to do this? They don't give you a book. These are the steps you do. You have to go in there and talk to the people. You have to look at them. You need to be them so they could understand it. So in terms of negotiating, it's totally different. From contract administration was totally different. And then organizing, which was for me, I could organize until I die. I love organizing. I don't care, you would go to 15 homes in one day and talk to workers. And every home was different. Fred Ross taught us. Pay attention to what they have in their house. Compliment whatever they look at their pictures, look at the way they live. And he said something that I would never forget. Never, ever, ever exclude the woman in the house. Because when we went to go do those phone calls, they were mostly men. And I always included the wife. And it makes a difference. Because whether you like it or not, it's all like a man, doesn't it? It's the truth, and I saw that. And I remember the Lord's work telling us when we would be out in the picket lines and fighting when the teachers came in 1973, and she would say, a picket line is not a picket line without a woman, and it is the God's honest truth. So organizing and learning and being part of the staff is just amazing. And a lot of hard work, ups and downs. Caesar had his ideas, we would have debates, but we pretty much let them run. Pete Moyer was a good director.
Thank you so much for sharing that. This is my favorite part of the night where I get to run around and take questions from all of you. So if you have a question for the entire panel or even a specific panelist, please raise your hand and I'll come to you. Don't be shy. Thank you so much.
Hi, this is for anybody. So much work, so much emotional stuff. Is there at one point, any time that you just said, I can't do this anymore? Or was there a time where it just got too hard to just keep going with the mission of helping like the marchers and all that? Was there just a time where you just kind of step back a little bit and take a breather?
Anyone want to start off?
No. Let me tell you our schedule for a work day, working with United Farmworkers with Caesar. When he gave you an assignment, he knew you could do it, even though sometimes you thought you couldn't. And then when you did it, it would just make you stronger and make you want to do it more. Long hours, no days off. We worked weekends. I think in the early 80s, we started working half day on Saturdays. So we had half day Saturday and then Sunday. We only had Sunday off. No phones, no TV, no McDonald's, no food to eat, no money. We would go to our Miami village and eat with the brothers, or we would get our food from the canned goods and eat whatever we got in the cans. But the passion, giving up, never. Tired, yes. I never gave up. I left in '88 because you reach a certain age and where you need to look after yourself, and I was already in my 40s. Oh, I don't even want to say how old I was. I didn't even think I would be able to get a job after working with United Farmworkers, but I got lucky. But tired, yes, but never give up. In fact, the more harder it got, the more passionate, more angry I got. Oh, hell no, they're not gonna do this to me, I'll find a way. And that's the way I survived.
Our schedules were 5 in the morning to 8 or 10 at night, every day. We have to get up early to get there before the crew gets there. We can set up a picket line, so when the workers were coming in, you can tell them, hey, please stop, let's talk before you go in. So we did that every morning, every day, Monday through Sunday. The thing is with us, if you were not in the picket line, you were not out there in the picket line with your sign, you were chasing a truck that had brakes and they were going to a shed or they were going to out of town. Somebody was doing something. And when they got to the shed or they got to the place of storage, you open your trunk, get your picket sign and start picking the place. So it was never a stop with us. Every day was from 5 to 8 at night or 10 o'clock at night. After we finished our picket line, we had to go out there and knock on doors to talk to the people. But they would tell us, come to the house tonight. I can't talk to you right now. Come to the house tonight. And we had to do that. That's what our schedule was.
I wasn't around back then, so I'm not gonna act like I was, but but what's interesting is that, today we sit here and we celebrate the historic Farmworker movement, and, you see my papa's name on street signs and stuff, and you would think by it that, these folks were always just super successful. But the simple fact of the matter is that they faced more defeats than they actually had victories. But the way that they responded to those defeats is what defines the legacy of the Farmworker movement. You hear the word Sequoias. That isn't just some catchy catchphrase that Dolores came up with. It's not just something that we sit here and say for fun. That speaks to the embodiment, and that speaks to kind of who this organization is. My Dr. Caesar always tell people that you lose when you give up. My dad showed the story of me a long time ago where he was organizing a statewide campaign in tech, and they were trying to get so many votes in Sacramento, and they've been just mobilizing workers up and down the state, doing lobby visits, doing sit-ins in legislators' offices, came to the final vote. When they got to the final vote, they ended up losing by 1 vote. It was the first big blow my dad got. He was 25 years old. He said he felt like hell. He felt like, he let everybody down. They lived in La Paz. From La Paz to Sacramento, it's about a 5-hour drive. The final vote took place at about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. My doctor consulted the workers a little bit and told them, don't worry, we're going to keep on going. He says, Paul, come on, let's drive home. So he jumped in the car. My dad said, yeah, I'm not going to sleep anyways. As they're driving home, he said, what you have to understand about our work, about Causa, is that it's not like a baseball game where after 9 innings, the team with the most amount of runners wins and the other team loses. It's not a political race on election night. There's a top vote getter wins and the person who doesn't have those votes loses. In our work, you only lose when you give up. So tonight, what Cynthia said, let's go get some rest, but tomorrow we're going to dust our shoulders off and we're going to get back to work. Because if we don't work, well, the people aren't going to have what they deserve. And so that is the cornerstone of the Farmworker movement. And I think that's something that we can all use as a source of inspiration. It's something that I use till this day. Because as you all are in college, there's going to be times when you feel like giving up. There's going to be trials and tribulations when you feel like quitting. But think back to the folks that are listening here tonight and say, if they were able to do it, working for $5 a week, Lord knows how many hours a week, if they were able to do it, so I can have the opportunity I have today, then what's in front of you right now is nothing. I can do it. See, so well, then just tell yourself that. And think about these people who came from the same communities that you come from. It's going to be incredible to see what you can do. Absolutely.
Can I
Yeah, please.
Before I forget, and we all forget, today is St. Patrick's Day, right? Everybody wearing green? Today is March 17th, and that's the day that we started the march in 1956. March 17th. And it was a Thursday, also in 1966. Wow, what a coincidence. We're doing this thing today, March 17 on a Thursday, and that's when we started the march, on March 17, 1966. Wow. 25 days we walked. There was a town in Porterville town, a company donated 100 pairs of boots for the marchers. Boy, that was amazing help. Once we put on those boots, we thought we were stepping on clouds, you know. So we were walking with our Sunday shoes, you know. We didn't know anything about, you know, marching. We didn't know anything about that. But today is the day the march started in 1966. Wow, you know, you look at the date. It says every March 17 for me. It's not so much as St. Patrick's Day. No. To me, that's the day that I was down in one knee, tying my shoe, ready to start the march at 6 in the morning. That's what I remember every year. And it's been about 56 years. 56 years that we did that. Just wanted to let you know about today's date.
How can folks find you in that photo right there? How can they tell which one is you?
Oh, the handsome one.
That's great. The one with the famous Ray-Ban shades, is that right?
This is, right here. That's me. That says that right there. And that's me.
That's right. We are living among legends.
Right here, look at the people, about over 2,000 people in Sacramento River, 3 miles before we get to the state capitol. We already getting there. Look how many people we had.
By the time it finished, I read, maybe it's more, maybe even more. Started with about 100, ended with 10,000 people in Sacramento.
10,000 people.
Anyone have a question? Yes.
Yes, I've got a question. Throughout those 25 days, either before or in the midst of those days, two-part question. Number one, did you guys ever discuss a plan about how you're gonna get back? And what was the plan to get back?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a good question. We didn't think about all that. We just wanted to get there real fast and then let's see what happens afterwards, you know. But yeah, no, you know, we came back in buses. They came back and our families came and picked us up, and that's how we got back. I was presenting the key of the city of Sacramento on behalf of all of the marchers, the peregrinos, what we call peregrinos, the pilgrimage. I was given the key to the city, and it's up there in La Paz. If you ever go to La Paz, the headquarters, you'll see the key to the Sacramento in 1966. But it was April 10th, Easter Sunday. And we knew that Governor Brown told us that he was not going to be there. Governor Brown, the dad of Jerry Brown. He was not going to be there, and we said, we don't care, but we're still going to go. And when we get there, we're going to knock on your door. We're going to knock on your door, and we did. We knocked on the door. And we know he was not there, but just let him know. But guys, for your information, this is the first time that farm workers ever marched to the state capitol to go see the governor. It's never been done before. So we made history. We're in the history books. People are reading about us. We made history on that day.
Online here. The first of which, and maybe we can tie these two together because I think they're kind of related. Oliver asked, tensions between law enforcement and farm workers were alluded to. Could the panelists comment a little bit more on the history of police and farm worker relations, especially how maybe that impacted the strike, or how the strike impacted those relations? And then additionally with that, have there ever been a time where workers were too afraid of protesting due to people getting arrested, and how did you overcome that? Maybe Cynthia, do you want to start off with this one?
We got arrested a lot. especially after the National Labor Relations Act passed in LRB in 1975, when we were allowed to go in to talk to workers in the fields during the break times and lunchtime, you know, so we won, instead of going to their homes and following them to their house and visiting them after work or then giving you your address, we could go in the fields and talk to the workers while they were having their lunch break and the breaks. And we were being arrested. We had a plan as organizers to run into the fields once we found out where we were gonna go. We needed to get contacts, we needed to talk to the workers. And here you have the sheriff, Tulare, Kern County, arresting us like we were, like, you see the Martin Luther King on the demonstrations and others, the same thing. They would come after us, we would hide. I would hide sometimes in the bathrooms outside the outhouses, and then I would hold my breath and I would hear the sheriff pass by. And we always had a little notebook with a pen, and we would go in and try to get as many names and addresses so we could go visit them at their homes, talk to them, organize them, get them to sign the authorization card, talk about the election process, their rights. And we would run out, and we would see the sheriff had a lot of us literally arrested and taken. They would take us in. But then it got too expensive for the county, so they kept us in the sheriff car. So it would be sometimes 2 or 3 of us, and some of us never got caught. And then when we would run on the other side of the field, we were locked up and we were already outside. And we would be so excited because we had 4, 5, 6 addresses and names of people we were going to go visit. It didn't slow us down. But they took us, the first time they took us, Helen Chavez was in it, Linda, Lou, Josefina Hernandez, Josephine Rodriguez. They took us, they arrested us, but they started taking us into Fresno, to the jailhouse, and they kept us in the buses. And then they would take us to the jail in Fresno, and we were not being released until 10 o'clock at night, and then you would have, of course, our people out there with signs protesting to have us released. And we would be all put in the jail, all these women, and we were not afraid. First time I was ever arrested, we were not afraid. It just made us angry that they would do that. And then we would go on and do it again the following day. And then, of course, I guess they gave up in terms of taking us to the jail, but they did keep us in the sheriff cars for the duration of the break. So we did have our run-ins with them.
We had a lot of run-ins with the cops, with the police, highway patrol, the sheriff department. I went to jail 5 times. Mostly they said that I was in private property. I said, this is public, right here. It's not private, this is public. Come on, let's go. And off we went. They started using the paddy wagon, they started filling it up every day. Every day we had problems. We were getting arrested, sure, they were, you know, we knew that they were there on their side, the Grover side. You know, they wanted to harass us and intimidate us and so forth. Every time I went into the jail, I heard that all the other jailers in there, they would say, we have another Charlie boy here. They were bringing me in. And then next day, 2 days later, they would let us out, and I would go back and get my ticket signed, and they would look at me and say, oh, again, you again? You know, they wanted to, intimidate us. It scared us. No way. We have a job to do, and we're gonna do it. Yeah, but we had a lot of problems with the police, yes. Discrimination and problems with the police and everybody. Yeah.
So the first day of the march, when they turned the corner on Albany, right? They're moving over on the Albany Street. You have the scene of South Alabama, but here in Delano, California, where you have the Delano Police Department kind of lined up, and they stopped, and there was a standoff for about an hour,
2 hours.
2 hour standoff, and they were saying, you can't march here, and they knew their constitutional rights, and then the police finally moved over and they were able to begin the march. But
They were telling us that we didn't have a permit march on the streets of Delano. I said, we do have a permit. We went to the city hall, we went to the clerk's office, and we got a permit. We did. But you don't have a permit for this parade. We call it a parade. This is not a parade. This is a pilgrimage. This is a march. Do you see any floats behind us? Let's go. I read it again. You know what? Yeah, they kept us 2.5 hours right there. So when we went to the first time to do court, we were 2 hours late.
And for those of you that have time later, there's a clip on YouTube. Robert F. Kennedy challenging the Kern County sheriffs for illegally detaining and arresting farm workers. And RFK asked them, how can you arrest these people when they haven't committed a crime? And then the sheriff responds, well, they're ready to commit a crime, as he gets booed by farm workers and attendees in the audience. And then RFK gives one of the most best political clapback I've ever heard. He says, in the interim period during the lunch break, I suggest that the Kern County District Attorney and the sheriff read the Constitution of the United States.
You know, I think the other thing on jailing and stuff like that, back in the day, you could go to jail for saying the word money. As simple as that, back in '65, when they had an injunction against it. You know, the growers and their cop friends thought that they could deteriorate the strikers and the farm workers by throwing them in jail, but really what it actually did was kind of a blessing in disguise. And what they began to do is they said, well, geez, being in jail is kind of nice. We get to sleep on the bed, we get 3 square meals a day, let's fill the damn jails up. And so they began to use it as a tactic against them to fill the jails up, and so then they began to get inundated with having to take all these requests. And so after a while, sometimes they just could arrest people because they're saying, now they're turning it on us. The second thing that happened is that, you know, they realized that they were never going to win the strike in Kern County in the backyard of the growers because they controlled all the institutions. They controlled the courts, they controlled the police, they controlled everything. And so, you know, again, underestimating the farm workers and how they were going to respond to that, what in turn happened was they decided to start the Great Boycott. And it was really the Great Boycott that really kicked everything off and began to hit the growers in their pocketbooks so that they could get union contracts. And so even their, you know, their tough tactics proved to turn against them. And, you know, that just goes to show you that when there's fear and intimidation, there's always ways to beat it, and that's what they did, you know, consistently throughout the time, you know, the farmers movement.
Absolutely. We're just a little bit over time. I don't know if you have a hard deadline, but I do want to be respectful of your time as well as all of our attendees. And so I want to do a couple of things before we close off with our final question. Somebody online also asked what sorts of events are going on. This month, the Living the Legacy Committee, which this was referring to, is hosting a lot of events. Here in Ponderosa Hall on March 23rd, we're going to have Dr. Rodriguez give a talk here. It's going to be from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., also free and open to the public. On Friday, March 25th, we're going to have that art and poetry contest in conjunction with the vaccination clinic right here at COS. It's going to be out here in the quad area. It's going to start at 3 p.m. and go all the way to 7 p.m. So please come on out. There's going to be booths, tables, and vendors and things like that. On March 31st, there's going to be a movie screening right here in the Visalia quad area, outdoors, so you can bring a lawn chair, bring a blanket, it's going to be free. There's going to be free popcorn, pizza, and drinks while supplies last, so get there early. There's going to be a screening of the film Knock Down the House. And then the very next day, on Friday, we're going to have another movie night. Why not? And that is going to be the documentary that you all saw earlier, Cesar's Last Fast. 2 weeks from today, on Cesar Chavez Day, and then the next day on April 1st, right? And so, as we close off, I'm going to ask you all to do something for me and for us, so we can continue hosting these sorts of events. I'm asking you to, for those of you in person, we're going to pull up a QR code here that you can scan on your phones. It's a very short survey. If you want to give us feedback about today's event, what you learned, how you're connecting it to your classes, it certainly helps us to know how we can do better, and hopefully to continue hosting these events in the future. For those of you online, Nels has so graciously dropped a link in the chat. If we can also please give a quick hand applause to Nels, who is also new to our COS community and just been fantastic. I was worried about the audio, the lights, all these things, and he's just been a total rock star, so thank you, Nels. And to close off, maybe in a couple of sentences, I want you all to answer this one question, or I guess it's kind of two questions. One, what is your favorite memory being a part of this movement? And two, what do you think people can do today to continue the legacy of farmworker movements? So we'll start with Mr. Villion.
Well, my memory, this memory is about really being there with the family during critical time. I was just, my eyes, I was just, it was one thing after another interviewing these people, that people who was, I knew no one. So it was just, the good thing was I was recording for history. I could see it later, so I didn't even think about what I was doing, just do it, make sure it works. One thing I really wanted to say for anything was, a lot of people forget that Cesar Chavez was a veteran. He was in the Navy, and 5-6 years ago, the Navy was so smart that they named a ship after him. And not a lot of people know that, they really don't. They named the boat Cesar Chavez, can you imagine? And now, that was half of it, the other half was that ship doesn't have a gun, doesn't have a cannon, a missile on it. It's a service boat, or it goes out in service, either the water treatment or gas for the other ships. So it's not like a violent ship with guns and cannons and missiles. It's a peaceful, but I just thought you really needed to know that, because it's really significant to me, myself being in the Army. Not too many people know that he was in the military. It's very important. I mean, he never said that once. Even when I was there, until way later, I found out that he was in the military. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Villion.
Speaking about the ship, I heard that it was a submarine ship. I said, we could have used that. We could have used that with the police away, But anyway, what most important to me was, again, the March to Sacramento. It was an honor for me to be named Capitan of the historic march by Cesar Chavez. At first, I said no. He said, nobody's gonna listen to me. He said, no, they will. I see you out there working. I know they're gonna listen to you. And good, and we did. I got 7 assistants to help me, and we did a good job. From 77 of us to 10,000 people, and the last, what you see there, 2,000 going into Sacramento. That's what's gonna be, remember, my kids, my family, they don't know what I did. They treasure that, and they're gonna say they're gonna keep up the good work that we did many years, and hopefully you guys can do the same thing.
I swear I have so many funny memories with Caesar, but he was a bad joke. He used to tell jokes really bad, but there was one joke I have to say, and somehow it comes to mind with what's happening right now with Ukraine. He would get us in a meeting and he would say, I have a joke, and we must have heard it like 18 times, but we always laughed. And he would say, you know how you survived a nuclear event? And we all looked at him, and then he would bend over, and he would bend his knees, and then he would put his head between his knees, and then he would say, and then you could kiss what, goodbye, and we started out laughing. We always thought that was funny, and he had that twinkle in his eye, because when he would tell a joke, he thought it was the funniest thing, but sometimes it was, and sometimes it wasn't. But I loved the twinkle in his eyes. A lot of people that know Caesar, when you would give an idea, or when you would argue with him, or you would disagree with him or not, and he liked it, and he would look at you, and he had that twinkle. I haven't seen anyone talk about that twinkle. A few people do, but I used to love seeing that twinkle in his eye. What I want to leave you with is don't forget where you came from, ever. Because you are part of the community, and we need people that are gonna stay, whether they get a wonderful education, you move on, whatever field you decide to do, think about how it's gonna help your community. Don't abandon your community, because that's what makes it strong.
You know, if I have to share my favorite memory, I'll just speak to some of the current work of the Farmworker movement. This past spring of 2021, when the vaccine was being rolled out, we knew that the Latino community, especially farm workers, had been one of the most hard-hit communities from COVID-19. And so we went back to the historic 40 acres and we put on a 6-week vaccination clinic, vaccinating over 3,000 workers. And I played a key role in that, and that was probably the greatest professional accomplishment that I've ever had, because we began to see the immediate effects, and workers would come out crying, saying, now I know that I'm going to be able to provide for my family. Now I know that, you know, I'm not going to lose the person who's standing next to me. And so that was really cool. In terms of the one thing that I can leave you all with is that today you all probably had a lot of fun learning about history, just like I did. Now you all can be a part of history. There's things happening in your backyards. There's things that are happening currently. Just like when they were young, and they jumped in and they got involved. At times you might be a little intimidated, you may not know how to get involved. There's a lot of good organizations out there who are looking for bright, young, talented folks like you all, and who could just use an extra hand. So if you enjoyed learning about history today, think about, how am I going to be a part of history? What am I going to do to make my mark? And the final thing that I want everybody to do here is, how many of you know the Farmworker plaque? It's nice and easy, and we work our way faster, but why don't we give a big Farmworker clap for the veterans of the Farmworker movement that are here with us today.
There we go.
¿Se puede o no se puede?
Sí se puede.
¿Se puede o no se puede?
Sí se puede.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. Please give our panelists another round of applause. So much. We hope you can join us at our next event. Please, continue to monitor email, social media, however you heard about today. And thank you so much for joining us, to all of you in person and online. Please travel safely home.
Please, if you want, take a moment to check out the photos.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same thing. I just won't from my memories, because this is amazing.
Oh.